Right now, as mentioned, as we do every Wednesday, almost every Wednesday anyways, at this time, it is time for the crossover with Don Taylor and Rick Dhaliwal, the two hosts of Donnie and Dhali, which you can watch every day, Monday to Friday, 10 to noon on Check TV. And they join us now. What's going on, fellas? Nice to do this after a couple of weeks apart.
Yeah, it's good to see you guys again.
Nice. Well, Rick was away last week. I wasn't.
Why? What do you mean?
Well, no, I did the hit with them.
Donnie did a hit with us.
Yeah, because
very graciously a Friday afternoon.
Yeah.
Yeah, hold it a second.
Good
I had to do Bruff and
I
Rough
know,
in the morning.
I know.
That's why.
Look,
You
the forces
Those guys
outside of
are a
our
handful,
control
by the way.
conspired against each other last week, right? The snow, and then Drance was sick.
Exactly.
I mean, it didn't work out. It's all right.
I like, though, I always thought that this segment was prone to get off the rails, Dhali, because of you and me. But then we had Donnie on the show, and it went just as far off the rails without you there. So you've been exonerated. You are not the cause of our chaotic group energy. Congratulations to you.
By the way, speaking of our hit with Donnie on Friday, we had somebody who wanted to ask us to ask you, Rick, are you a big charcuterie board fan?
A charcuterie guy? A charcuterie board?
Yeah.
No, not what.
Do you know what a charcuterie board is?
Of course I know what a charcuterie. You talk about it all the time on the show. I got nothing to do with charcuterie boards. I could care less if 5 were sitting right in front of me. Why? What's so good?
We brought it up last week.
Why?
Thomas brought it up for whatever reason, and I made the point that back in the day, my mom and dad would have people over. They'd throw some Ukrainian sausage, cheese, pickles, and crackers on a plate and serve it, and everybody loved it. Now you can do the same thing, throw it on a piece of wood, and charge $55.
Oh,
and it kind of went,
okay,
went
I see
from
what
there.
you mean.
I think it came up
Sorry to
because
repeat that, you guys.
Rutherford and Aquilini had mentioned in the first meeting, right? They bonded over a charcuterie board at Jim Rutherford's house. I think that's how it came up. Anyways, we don't need to belabor the point too much.
Speaking of an expensive charcuterie board.
Yes, I'm sure that one probably cost more than $55.
Tough segue.
Game day tonight, Canucks and the Blues, and I think a lot of the speculation around this, I was just saying before you guys got on, it's remarkable. The team keeps winning, even though there are some of these questions creeping back in about the performance of the Lotto line. What do you guys think we see tonight, and what do you think they should do? Is it time to split this up and have another look at some different line combinations?
You know, you said something that we didn't bring up on our show. What does it mean for the other lines, which have been pretty good? And I guess, with the so-called second line, maybe just for one game, it was pretty good. I got the feeling, I don't know, guys, all along, I don't know, looking back to the road trip, I got the feeling that right off the bat that Rick Tocchet wasn't a big fan of this. Yeah, and maybe he was convinced to do it, and then they ended up producing so well that they had to stick with it. So I wouldn't be surprised for a second, just by what he says, little hints in his body language whenever he talks about that Lotto line. I wouldn't be surprised if they weren't together tonight.
Guys, the Canucks feel they love their center depth. They love the fact they're a strong team up in the middle of the ice. You can move Suter to the wing. Then you're going to have Miller, Pettersson, Bluger, and Amon. I think they're happy with that. I think they really like being strong up the middle of the ice. And look, what's the worst thing that's going to happen? Pettersson goes to center. Now you got a great 1-2 combo up the middle of the ice. And you know what? I have no issues with it. And if Kuzmenko starts doing Kuzmenko things, and then, and all of a sudden Pettersson's winger is now a whole lot better than he was before, and maybe things settle down and they can go back to their old ways. But apparently they're having a meeting today, and they're going to decide before tonight's game if they're going to break them up or not.
Is that a meeting, Rick, with the players or with internally the organization?
I don't know.
The coaching staff.
Coaching staff is going to. Tocchet said they're going to have a meeting this afternoon to decide if they're going to keep the Lotto.
It's such a strange situation. They're winning, right?
They're winning.
They're winning, and I guess they feel things aren't perfect, even though they're winning. And that looks like they're going to at least discuss breaking up their best line. Just strange.
Rick, in terms of the big line, that JT Miller, Pettersson, Besser group, working or not, does it have implications for what this club could target at the deadline? Like, could the performance of this line sway Rutherford, Alvin, and company to pursue a top 6 winger versus a top 6 center in the months ahead?
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. That's why I told you off the top, they really like their strength up the middle of the ice. It really leads me to believe they're going to get a winger, And when Canucks scouted Ottawa and Montreal last night, look who's in that game, guys. Sean Monahan, Tarasenko, Claude Giroux, this Jack-Eye guy, Donnie, he's in there. All these guys. There's a
That was good. That was good. That was perfect.
That's a tough
Guys,
one, too.
We spent half an hour today trying to figure out how to pronounce his name.
Okay, so I
how
got
close,
to work, and I
how
was
close
told
was
keep
Rick
an eye
to Xerox
on
at
this.
the start?
I was told to keep an eye on this Arbor guy. So I showed.
That's what we got.
That's what we got. So I showed Donnie's last name because I was going to butcher it 100%. And Donnie said Jack-Eye. That's what you call him, Arbor Jack-Eye.
They're trolling you at this point, Rick.
Hey, what are you laughing at, Grant?
Isn't that right?
No,
It's been a long time.
No, it is Jack-Eye. It is
Yeah.
Jack-Eye. I'm just saying. I feel like there's at least a 50-50 shot that various sources are leaking to you the hardest to pronounce names in the NHL. It's Canucks targets. Just to see how you do.
Russian, Eastern European names.
Hey, I'm an honest guy, so I came to work. I showed Donnie the last name, and I said, Donnie, look, I don't got a snowball's chance in hell. And Donnie said, it's Jack-Eye.
Well, the
Yep,
first time
nailed
I
it.
noticed him is when, and it's Zach Cassian's birthday today. Remember him? Like doing
He's a
a
tough
number
kid.
on Zach Cassian. It was last year.
Yeah, that's right.
In Montreal, he was tough. Ooh.
So anyways, Canucks
Who's his
scouting
brother?
Ottawa, Montreal, there's a multitude of guys on both teams the Canucks could go after. I was told right now, though, that Sean Monahan's not on their list. But these lists are always subject to change. You guys know that. We got a long time to go before the trade deadline. But anyways, there was a lot of guys in Ottawa, Montreal game the Canucks could be potentially after, right, guys? And
What do you
Arbor Jack-Eye,
Arbor
I
Jack-Eye.
believe, is one of them.
We're back to him.
What do you think, Rick? Because a lot of the forward names you mentioned there, UFAs, Tarasenko, Sean Monahan.
Yeah.
Do you think they have a preference? Are they willing to go the rental route, or would they rather try to look for somebody with at least one more year term left after this one?
Well, that's where they got to sit down as a group, and is every deal. And Thomas would know this. Every deal is different. Guys with term, guys without terms, the UFAs, all these guys. What are you willing to give up? And that's going to be the great big thing that we're going to find out in this city heading up to the deadline is, are the Canucks willing to take term? Are they willing to, everyone talks about Gensel and Gensel and Gensel. Well, last time I checked, guys, his July 1st price is pretty high. And, he's overperforming his $30 million deal. How the heck would you, let's say his agent, I'm just guessing, he wants $7-8 million. How do you get that in Vancouver? Like, how would you possibly get that contract on in Vancouver when Pedersen and Hronek are asking for big money? And then they got 7 UFAs, some significant ones that they can't sign them all. The Canucks, and they keep telling you, and the Canucks are giving you hints in the market when they say guys in Abbotsford have to step up next year. You know why they're saying that? Because they can't re-sign all their UFAs. They can't. They just will not simply be in a position to re-sign them all.
Well, maybe it's a one-shot deal, though, right? And then you go and get a guy like Gensel because you don't know if this group's going to be together.
That's true too.
And they won't be. It won't be together pretty soon. If they feel, hey, look, we got to do it now or never, then they go for a guy, a guy like that. But guys, how many times, other than Zadorov, which is recent, have the Canucks or any team have they gone after and obtained a player they were talking about for a long, long time? Yeah. Like, I'm looking back to J.T. Miller. I mean, how did we know about that?
No, it's just out of the blue.
Like, from what I know, it came out of nowhere. So maybe there's some name out there that not even Rick has mentioned on the air.
Philip Hronek
it's
last
gonna
year
be
as well,
interesting.
right? That was
Yeah,
Hronek
great
last
point.
year was out of nowhere.
That's a great one.
Yeah.
And Alvin had been monitoring Hronek for quite some time, by the way. That just didn't come up in like 2-3 weeks before that deal. He's liked that player for a long time.
Gentlemen, I'm curious to get your take on this because it wasn't just the Canucks, right, at that Montreal-Ottawa game. I mean, that was about as well-attended a scout section as we've ever seen. When you think about, I often think about teams in various moments of their building cycle. And one team that comes to mind is, in 2010, when the Florida Panthers launched their sort of rebuild, right? They traded Nathan Horton and Seidenberg and Greg Campbell to Boston, right? And they traded Chris Higgins, Keith Ballard, and there was one other guy. Chris Higgins, Keith Ballard, anyway, someone else to Vancouver. Oh, David Booth ultimately, but I guess the next year to Vancouver.
Yeah.
And in some ways, it's like they staffed the rosters, right? Their decision to rebuild and the teams that bought from them staffed the roster of the Stanley Cup finalists that year. I kind of wonder about Ottawa. Like, if Ottawa decides to move someone higher profile, a non-rental type guy, could that be the team, right? That should they change direction pretty dramatically here, staffs the roster. What do you think about that? And is that the type of opportunity, something a little more under the radar in the Filip Hronek mold that this organization should maybe be looking at as opposed to rentals?
Yeah, and look, there's a lot of talented players there as well.
Yeah.
Let's not forget that, because the thinking is with the Ottawa Senators that they were going to do something special, like make the playoffs. This unit just hasn't worked out for them. But no, that's a great point. Beyond Tarasenko and the players that are going to be UFAs, who else is out there? And there's, like a lot of, this is pie in the sky, but Jake Sanders is not going anywhere. But there's a lot of great players, like real promising players on that roster. And that's a really good point. I'd forgotten that about Florida. And just the history of trades between the Canucks and Panthers, Thomas, you work there, is lengthy. But I forgot that about the Bruins as well.
And Carson Soucy, guys, his injury makes me wonder, where's the Canucks' level of comfort on blue line? Hey, thank goodness, that you got a defenseman like Juleson that was sitting there waiting, and waiting for his opportunity, and he got it. But do the Canucks go out and add one more defenseman? I mean, you just don't know when injuries are going to hit down the stretch in the playoffs. Are there some defensemen? I mean, we hear Chris Tanev's name a lot, but there's nothing imminent there. There's a ton of teams after Chris Tanev. Have fun getting him. That's not going to be a cheap price. I mean, you think they want to send him to a team in their division? And, but I will say one thing about Tanev. He loves Vancouver, and he's got a soft spot in his heart for this city. He should never have left. And everybody in this organization absolutely still loves that guy. So, but I'm not hearing anything imminent on Tanev. But, that would be a hard purchase for sure.
I think the city has a soft spot in their heart for Chris Tanev, too. So that's very much a mutual thing. Rick, I'm curious to get your take on this. I've been sort of spitballing on the radio about, should the Canucks add another defenseman? Do you think it makes sense for it to be more of a puck moving type, like maybe a more dynamic puck carrier, given how reliant on what this top pair has been able to do this team has been? What are your thoughts?
Look at their blue line. It's one of the biggest blue lines in the NHL.
Right.
I give them so much credit to going out and getting Cole and Soucy and Zadorov and what's his talking raves about.
It's been a
big
massive
blue
turnaround.
lines. They went out and addressed
Vegas, yeah.
They are so much harder to play against. And the greatest thing about the rough game we had last week, I can't remember which game it was. It got rough last week.
Arizona.
The pushback was incredible.
Yeah.
It was
Arizona. Yeah.
The pushback.
Buffalo.
How many times, and Donnie and I talk about this all the time, how many times the teams come into Vancouver and say, you know what, that wasn't a hard team to play against. I don't think you can say that anymore about the Canucks, and I think a big part of that is their blue line. And and they got, by the way, Thomas, they got 3 UFA defensemen.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know what's going to happen there, but their blue line could look totally different next year. And Hronek, his contract's not going to be easy to do, folks.
No.
If you guys think that's an easy contract, you're out to lunch. That one, like Thomas, I don't know when they're going to how that one ends up getting done. But they're obviously going to have to do it. He is club controlled. But that blue line could look totally different next year with 3 UFA defensemen. But I like the size. I like the way they went out and improved that blue line, and it's one of the biggest pluses.
But what Thomas was talking about there it speaks to what we were just talking about a couple of conversations ago. In that maybe when you talk, they got to add some more physicality. They got to add more. Well, maybe it's something that we're not even looking at, like another defenseman who can move the puck. And then I wonder, guys, like, given the history of the National Hockey League in the playoffs, what happens in the postseason? Defensemen get injured.
Yeah, that's it.
Right? Yeah. And so far, the Canucks have been, I mean, I know Carson Soucy's hurt right now, and there's a situation with Guillaume Brisebois as well, but they've been really lucky injury-wise. Really lucky.
Donnie.
And I wonder if part of them, part of the thinking with Alvin and Rutherford is this can't last. We have to make sure we have depth on defense. And maybe they go after defensemen, maybe a puck-moving defenseman like you're talking about, Thomas.
Well, and I think that's more my take than anything is like, when you put Quinn Hughes with even Ethan Bear last year, and now Hronik's taken it to another level, you get a totally different set of outcomes from him. If you lose a Carson Soucy, you have a Noah Juleson, right? You have a Mark Friedman. Honestly, you probably feel comfortable with Christian Wolanin, and it takes you 3 injuries before you get there, right? But if you lose one of the top pair guys in ahead of a crucial Game 6, do you have a guy who can step up and replace something? No one can replace those guys, but at least allow you to play a similar way. That's sort of as I'm raising the bar here and thinking like, what would it be nice for this team to have in late May if they get there? That's sort of one thing that stands out to me. What do you think?
Yeah, for sure. I know what you're saying. If there's an injury, well, God forbid Hughes gets hurt, but who can possibly on that blue line do what he's doing? Nobody.
Not many.
Nobody in the world.
No one in the league, really. I was going to say not many.
Well,
but,
nobody. Yeah. But Thomas, are those guys growing on trees at the deadline? Are a ton of those guys
somebody
available?
who plays similarly?
Yeah,
I'm talking about
a similar game. Yeah,
I'm talking about buying.
Yeah.
I'm talking about buying like a Bear type as insurance, as opposed to trying to replace those guys in full. You know what I'm saying? That like lower level guy, but who can at least plug in without causing you to have to change the entire style of that pair.
Speaking of all the UFAs, and you were listing
just an idea.
You were listing them on the blue line, but it's also up front with Bluger and Joshua. Do you have a sense of kind of who's highest priority for them to retain? Because as you said, they're going to have to make some difficult decisions. They're not going to be able to bring all of them back, but I'm sure there's at least some they'd like to bring back, even if it's at a significant raise. Do you have a sense of kind of who's first on their priority list there, Rick?
No, you know what though? I do know this. They're going to take their time with the UFAs. Yeah. You're not going to see any signings today or tomorrow. The way it was told to me is they will address the UFAs at a later date. And there's so many of them. You don't even know what Pettersson's new deal is going to look like, right? Mm-hmm. So there's so many things that factor. But for me, guys,
Joshua.
Joshua. I'm going to give you my top 3. It's Zadorov, Bluger, and Joshua. Those are the 3 I think that's my wish list, Donnie, is if they can do the. I do know there's mutual interest with Zadorov. I told you guys that, Milstein's looking for term, but there is interest definitely in bringing him back.
Well, especially if you lose Myers.
Oh, that's it. And you're going to need Myers' money to help, sign some of these other guys that might all leave.
But I just and Bluger's got offensive upside, but what Joshua has shown offensively, those hands the other day in close, pretty impressive. The other thing I like about him is just how the season started for him, where he was in the doghouse, and how much he's rebounded to the point where you're wondering if that third line, and he's important part of it, is the second line, and he's got that size, and I know he's going to get offers. I'm pretty impressed by him.
Well, and PK, look at his PK minutes, Donnie. He's on the ice. He's on the ice late in games. The trust level with Tocchet defensively is with them, and when he goes to talk to his agent about a new deal, he doesn't have to go far because his agent is in White Rock, Rich Evans.
You run into him once in a while on walks.
Well, I go on walks every
with
Saturday.
Your dog.
Yeah.
What's happening with your dog? Why don't you tell everybody?
He's good. Well, I'm not telling that, Donnie. Come on, forget about the dog. Listen.
Dude, no, I love dog talk.
You can't tease us with a dog update. We're not giving to us.
This is a big dog-friendly show. That's a tough day.
I was asking Donnie for the updates.
Today?
Nah, 2 weeks.
Okay.
He's Australian.
Right after Rick.
Australian Shepherd Mini.
Love it.
You guys got a package deal at the vet.
It's a tough day, man.
Yeah,
it's a tough day when.
Yeah, four for one.
Yeah. Well, anyway, so I was asking Donnie. Donnie's the dog expert. So
Yeah,
sure.
it's a tough day when you pick your dog up from the vet after they get neutered. That's a tough one.
you feel
I'll
for
send
the
you my
guy,
tips,
feel for
bud.
the guy. But Rich Evans, forget about the dog. Listen to me, Thomas. Rich Evans and I run into each other every Saturday. He
What
lives
kind of
by
dog
me.
does he have?
He's got a little poodle, a Chihuahua poodle or something like that.
Those are very different breeds.
Yeah, hard to tell them
What?
apart.
It's really small. It's really small dog. Really small dog.
Well, how many?
Do you know if Rich Evans' dog is neutered? Can we get the update
Oh,
there?
100%. Rich Evans,
no.
come on. Man of science.
Check it out. Get back to us.
I'll get
Next
you
week.
an update. I'll get you an update.
I also need an update on how many cartwheels JP Barry did, Donnie, after, Dhali, after Tyler Myers took on the entire Maple Leafs team on national television on Saturday.
Hey.
My
Good.
goodness.
Yeah.
And two of the guys he took on were JP Barry clients.
Amazing.
Well,
Okay,
So
so
that would be 0 cartwheels.
Zero.
So maybe
he
one
basically
fewer
was
cartwheel.
going to punch out Tavares and Morgan Riley, which are JP Barry clients.
Right,
And,
that is
and
funny.
you know, hey, I will tell you guys something. Tyler Myers, improved play, 20 minutes a night, tons
Yeah.
of PK time. He's doing himself a lot of favors for July
yeah.
1st. And if you think you're getting him for $1 or $2 million, you're out to
Nope.
lunch.
Nope.
You really are. You really
Not to
are.
mention the scoring. He's scoring this year, too. Anyways, we got to let you guys go. I think
Yeah.
once we get to the dog
Pocket loves
neutering
him.
talk, that's a sign that
Yes.
we've hit our limit
Yeah.
for today.
Leo. His name's Leo.
We didn't even talk about the helmets.
Yeah.
Oh,
Next
yeah.
week.
Next week, I'm sure. All the best to Leo. And we'll get the update,
Yeah,
and
Leo.
we'll
Leo's
chat
his name.
next week. Have a great week, guys.
All right,
Thanks,
guys.
guys.
See you
That
later.
is Don Taylor and Rick Dollywall from Donnie and Dhali. You can watch it every day, Monday to Friday, 10 to noon on Check TV.